This is from Mary, Jesus' mother's point of view. When I heard that Jesus had been arrested, I ran and joined the crowd who followed him from the chief priest's house to Pilate's court. Of course, I was not allowed into the court, but when Pilate brought Jesus and that murderer Barabbas outside, I saw that my son had been beaten. Yet he stood there silent, like a lamb going to the slaughter, while the Jewish religious leaders and many others cried, "Crucify him!" Pilate really tried to get them to crucify Barabbas instead, but they wouldn't relent. They shouted even more loudly, "Crucify Jesus!" I tell you, my heart broke in two at that moment. I know. I know the angel Gabriel told me Jesus would be God's son and would save his people from their sins. I know all the prophecies that were fulfilled in his birth. I remember that Jesus himself, as a boy of 12, had told me he had to be about his Father's business. I knew he meant God, his Father. I had heard him speak in the synagogue the day he read from the prophet Isaiah. "The Spirit of the Lord is on me because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." I know all this, but I'm a mother, his mother, and this verdict was so hard to bear. I followed the crowd up to Golgotha, and after a while I saw the soldiers bringing my son. He was stumbling under the weight of the crossbar. He was covered in blood from head to foot. His outer garments were gone, and his tunic was sticking to his sweaty, bloody body. I wanted to rush to him, to bathe his wounds, to remove that hideous crown of thorns from his head, and to hold him in my arms. I wanted to have a chance to convince him to just plead guilty or call on his Father to save him. Anything to prevent the playing out of this dreadful scene. But I couldn't get near enough, and truthfully, I knew he was fulfilling his Heavenly Father's wishes. As the day drug on, I watched with some other women as my son was nailed to the tree. I heard his agonized cries, though I couldn't understand all that he was saying. At one point, I was able to get close enough to kneel at the foot of the cross. My own son was dying for my sins, and it was too difficult to watch. Suddenly, though, I heard him say, "Woman, here is your son." I looked up, and I saw that he was motioning between me and his beloved disciple, John. Then he said to John, "Here is your mother." Though I knew that meant he was close to death, I couldn't help but smile a little. How like Jesus to think of me when he was on the cross bearing my sins. Just minutes later, he died. I cannot lie, it was awful. I was devastated. But John took my hand and helped me up. He took me to his home and he ministered to me. Sunday morning, I arose very early and went to meet several other women, including Mary Magdalene and Salome. We had made plans to meet and then go to the tomb. Each of us had different spices to anoint Jesus' body. As we walked to the tomb, we suddenly realized the problem we might encounter. The stone in front of the tomb was huge, and none of us, not even all of us together, would be strong enough to roll it aside. We discussed who we might ask to help us, but we hadn't come to a decision yet when we arrived at the tomb just as it began to dawn. I can't tell you how surprised we were to see the stone already rolled away and several Roman guards lying on the ground as if asleep. Not knowing what we would find, we ran into the tomb, and there we got a bigger surprise. A young man in dazzling bright white robes was sitting in the tomb, and we became alarmed. When he saw our reaction, he immediately said, "Don't be afraid. You are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here because he has been resurrected. Go tell his disciples and Peter that he is arisen, just as he said he would, and he will meet them in Galilee." We ran out of the tomb faster than I've ever run before, not out of fear, but in pure rejoicing of spirit. Though we saw a few out on the roads, we said nothing. Maybe they thought we were crazy. I don't know. But we had to run tell Peter and the disciples. Mary Magdalene offered to go find Peter and bring him to John's house, so we parted ways with her. As we continued down the road, suddenly Jesus appeared before us and said hello to us. What a morning for surprises. This time, when I threw myself at his feet, it was in joy and worship.